The hearing room pulsed with an energy usually reserved for rocket launches and courtrooms. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Reporters tapped away on keyboards, aides whispered nervously, and the public gallery leaned forward in eager anticipation. At the center sat Elon Musk, not as the CEO of Tesla or SpaceX, but as a witness before Congress. His posture was calm, his suit simple, and his eyes carried that restless brilliance of a man who'd built rockets from scratch and stared down impossible odds. Across the dais, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, sharpened her words like blades. She leaned in, voice steady, but dripping with disdain. "Mr. Musk," she began, "I find it curious that someone with your, let's call it, outdated background thinks they can lecture us on modern policy. You're an engineer from a bygone era of combustion engines and early rockets. That doesn't exactly scream expertise in today's climate, does it?" The jab landed, the audience reacting with hushed murmurs. Musk didn't flinch. He sat still, hands folded, eyes fixed on her, not defensive, not angry, just studying, like a chess player who knew his next move 3 steps ahead. The silence grew heavy. Reporters typed furiously. AOC smirked, convinced she had painted Musk as a relic, a man clinging to fading credentials in a world demanding bold new ideas. But Musk only tilted his head slightly, the faintest trace of amusement flashing across his lips. And with that, the entire room felt the momentum begin to shift. The silence that followed AOC's jab stretched long enough to make the air itself feel heavy. Elon Musk, still unmoving, reached for a thin, dark leather folder resting on the table. His fingers moved with deliberate calm, the kind of precision that belonged to someone who had spent decades designing spacecraft. He opened it slowly, revealing neatly stacked documents, and pulled out a single page embossed with the seal of the U.S. Patent Office. He didn't wave it like a prop. He simply placed it in front of him, letting the cameras and eyes in the chamber take it in. "I don't think it's my degree that's the issue here," Musk finally said, his voice low, but carrying easily across the chamber. "It's what I've done with it." The words were simple, but the weight behind them shifted the energy of the room. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Aides stopped whispering. Even AOC, pen hovering over her notes, seemed to lose a beat. Musk leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on hers, not with hostility, but with the calm assurance of a man used to impossible odds. "I've spent my life building things people said couldn't be built," he continued. "Rockets, electric cars, solar energy networks. These weren't just ideas, they're working realities." The murmurs grew, no longer mocking, but uncertain. Musk's presence wasn't loud or theatrical. It was steady, like gravity pulling the room toward him. And with that, the hearing began to shift. AOC adjusted her microphone, determined to reclaim control. Her voice rang sharp. "That may be true, Mr. Musk, but one patent or one rocket doesn't make you the authority on systemic issues we're facing today. Climate, inequality, technology, these need fresh ideas, not stories from the past." The younger aides in the gallery nodded, eager for her words to trend. Reporters prepared their headlines, framing the clash as another bold stand from the progressive congresswoman. But Musk didn't flinch. He leaned back, letting her finish, his expression steady. When he finally spoke, it was in that unhurried cadence he was known for. "You think the world has moved past me," he said softly. "But the cars you drive, the satellites that bring internet to villages, the reusable rockets that cut launch costs by 80%. They exist because I refuse to believe old knowledge couldn't solve new problems." The words weren't loud, but they landed with weight. Musk reached for the patent again, tapping it once with his finger. "It's not the year on a degree that matters. It's whether you do the work." A silence swept over the chamber. The crowd, which moments ago leaned toward AOC, now shifted. The hearing no longer felt like a debate. It felt like a reckoning. The murmurs grew louder, but Musk didn't rush. He reached for the small tablet his aide had placed beside him. With a calm tap, the large screen behind the dais flickered to life. The audience hushed. The video rolled, a fundraiser packed with cheering supporters. On the screen, AOC's voice rang out with fiery conviction. "I've worked with people who fought their way up, folks who went to night school, who earned their degrees through sweat and sacrifice. They're the ones who bring real perspective." The clip froze on her smiling face, the words hanging heavy in the chamber. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters darted to type. Aides whispered furiously. AOC's eyes widened, her confident posture breaking for just a moment. Musk leaned into the microphone, his voice even and deliberate. "Congresswoman, that sounds a lot like me. My degrees weren't handed to me. I worked for them, just like the people you praised." The chamber exploded in whispers. The contradiction was undeniable. Musk had turned her own words into his shield, into his proof. The tide had turned and the world watching knew it. The chamber buzzed as the video faded from the screen. Musk didn't gloat, didn't raise his voice. He simply let the silence sharpen the weight of what everyone had just seen. AOC shifted in her seat, pen tapping against her notes, searching for a response. "Senator," she began again. Her tone clipped. "You're twisting my words. I was talking about adaptability, about leaders who can meet today's challenges. That's not the same as leaning on old credentials." Musk waited. He let her words settle, then leaned into the mic. "Congresswoman, I'm not twisting anything. I'm just holding up a mirror. You said hard work matters, that people who claw their way up bring the real perspective. That's me." The audience stirred. Reporters scribbled furiously. Tweets were already flying. Musk just turned AOC's own speech into his defense. He didn't stop there. "I've been underestimated my whole life," he said calmly. "I was told reusable rockets were impossible. I was told electric cars would never survive. I was told solar power couldn't compete. Yet here we are. The point isn't whether my degree is old. It's that my work is real." The murmur of agreement in the chamber grew louder. Musk hadn't just defended himself. He had reframed the entire debate. The weight of Musk's words lingered in the chamber like smoke after an explosion. AOC tried to cut through it, her voice firm, her arguments sharp. She spoke of systemic reforms, of new policies, of leaders who must be bold enough to rewrite the rules. The younger aides nodded again, grateful for her attempt to shift the narrative back into her hands. But Musk had already seized the room. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. He let her speak until her words began to lose momentum, until the chamber was once again waiting for his reply. Finally, he leaned forward. "Congresswoman," he said evenly, "big ideas are useless unless they can be built. I don't just talk about change. I build it, brick by brick, rocket by rocket, car by car." The sentence rippled across the hearing room. People straightened in their seats. Reporters scrambled, sensing another quote destined for headlines. Musk went on, his tone steady but more alive now. "When I was told electric cars were impossible, I didn't write an essay about it. I built Tesla. When people said space launches couldn't be affordable, I launched reusable rockets. When they doubted global internet could work, I launched Starlink. These weren't theories. They became reality." The room was transfixed. Even AOC, still poised, could only respond with silence for a beat too long. The chamber felt the tilt of power. Musk had turned the debate from credentials into concrete proof, from academic theory into undeniable results. And the audience, both in the room and watching live, knew. They had just witnessed a turning point. The hearing pressed on, but the balance of power was different now. Every word Musk spoke carried more weight. Every pause commanded silence. Reporters were no longer racing to highlight AOC's sharp attacks. They were scrambling to capture Musk's calm but devastating counterpoints. AOC leaned forward again, unwilling to back down. "Mr. Musk," she said, "you speak of rockets and cars. But governance is not engineering. It's about people. It's about vision for society. You can't just build your way out of every challenge." Musk nodded slightly, acknowledging her point before responding. His voice was measured, but there was a spark behind it now. "I agree. Governance is about people. But so are rockets. So are cars. So is every line of code and every solar panel. They exist for people. They exist so a farmer in Africa can power his home. So a child in rural America can have internet access. So we can preserve a planet worth living on." The audience stirred. Their eyes locked on Musk. This wasn't a technologist lost in details. This was a man connecting technology to humanity in a way that felt undeniable. He leaned back slightly, his tone steady, but his words sharpened. "You see, Congresswoman, systems are built by people. And if you want to understand the system, you need to understand the human struggle behind it. That's not theory. That's reality. I don't build for applause. I build because survival depends on it." The chamber was silent, the tension hanging thick. Even AOC, though still fierce, seemed to recognize the shift. Her attacks were meeting not just rebuttals, but an entire philosophy of purpose. And Musk, calm as ever, sat like a man who had faced storms before and knew he was weathering another one. The chamber buzzed again, but this time it wasn't in AOC's favor. The audience sensed it. Musk wasn't simply defending himself anymore. He was rewriting the terms of the debate. AOC tried once more, her tone sharp. "You talk about survival, Mr. Musk, but survival isn't enough. People deserve more than that. They deserve equity, fairness, and a government that ensures no one is left behind." Musk's gaze stayed fixed on her, steady and unwavering. "You're right," he said calmly, surprising the room. "People deserve more than survival. But survival is the foundation. Without clean air, without reliable power, without a planet that can sustain us, none of the rest matters." The room went still. Musk's words weren't combative. They were logical, yet deeply human. He leaned slightly closer to the microphone. "When I launched Tesla, I didn't do it because it was profitable. It wasn't. I did it because the planet needed it. When we built reusable rockets, it wasn't about money. It was about ensuring humanity had a future beyond Earth, fairness, equity, justice. They all collapse if we don't have a livable world to stand on." The crowd was riveted. Even some of AOC's usual supporters in the room shifted uncomfortably, realizing Musk wasn't dodging her point. He was expanding it, turning it into something far larger. AOC straightened her notes, her jaw tight. She wasn't finished, but she knew the ground beneath her had changed. And Musk, composed as ever, had made survival itself sound like the boldest vision in the room. By now the chamber felt more like a courtroom than a hearing. Every whisper echoed, every breath seemed to carry weight. AOC regrouped, leaning into her microphone. "Mr. Musk," she said firmly, "your accomplishments are noted. But this isn't Silicon Valley. This is Congress. You can't run a nation on patents and prototypes. We need leadership, not experiments." For a moment the room tilted back her way. Her words struck at the core of public service, at the divide between private innovation and public governance. But Musk didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his hands folded calmly on the desk. "I understand," he said, his tone quiet but carrying. "But I would argue leadership is exactly what this is. Leadership is standing in front of the world and saying, yes, we can do the impossible. It's not about being safe, it's about being bold enough to take the risk when it matters most." The audience leaned in. Musk's voice grew steadier, richer, pulling the room toward him. "Governments have always talked about innovation, but too often they wait for others to act. My teams and I didn't wait. We risked failure, humiliation, collapse, because someone had to. And every time, people said it couldn't be done. Every time they were wrong." He paused, letting the words breathe. "So when you say Congress needs leadership, I agree. But leadership without courage is just politics. Leadership is doing the work when others only talk about it." The chamber erupted in hushed chatter. Reporters furiously typed. Aides exchanged sharp glances, and AOC herself seemed to hold her breath. Musk's words had turned her critique on its head. His work was no longer framed as detached experiments, but as the very essence of leadership. And in that moment it felt undeniable. The air in the hearing room was electric, the kind of energy that signaled everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be replayed for years. Musk leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unbroken, while AOC clutched her pen tighter, her jaw set. "Leadership isn't just risk," she shot back. "It's accountability. It's about ensuring no one is left behind while you pursue your grand visions. People can't eat rockets, Mr. Musk. They can't pay rent with Mars missions." A ripple of applause rose from a small section of the audience, but it was quickly drowned by silence. Everyone waited for Musk's response. He nodded once, slowly, as if weighing the importance of what she had just said. Then he leaned into the mic. "You're absolutely right. Rockets don't feed people. Cars don't pay rent. But the breakthroughs behind them, the jobs, the technology, the cleaner air, the global internet, they change lives. Every satellite, every solar panel, every innovation becomes the foundation for opportunity. That is accountability." The room grew still. Musk's voice dropped softer, more personal. "When I was a kid in South Africa, I didn't have much. I read books. I dreamed. And people told me none of it would matter. But I know now that dreams do matter because they build the future. And if we stop dreaming big, if we settle for small, safe ideas, then we fail the people we claim to serve. The silence was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with recognition. Reporters paused mid-typing. Even AOC's expression faltered, her steel giving way to thought. Musk had turned her challenge into something larger, something universal. Finally, he closed his folder with a quiet snap, his voice calm, unwavering. "It's not about the paper on your wall. It's about what you build with it. And I'll keep building for everyone." The chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in a low, rolling wave of applause that grew until even the wood-paneled walls seemed to hum with it. The narrative was no longer about a degree or even about policy. It was about vision, grit, and the quiet authority of a man who refused to be defined by the past. And as the camera zoomed in on Musk's calm expression, the world outside the chamber knew this was the moment he had won.